Have you ever noticed how the most powerful people in any room aren't the ones frantically competing? They're not scrambling for position. They're not desperately proving their worth. They simply stand apart from the game entirely. And suddenly, everyone else looks like they're running in circles. Now imagine if you understood why, if you realized the true dominance doesn't come from playing the game better than everyone else. It comes from refusing to play by their rules at all. That's where the real power lies. You have been taught that success means competition, that winning requires you to enter the arena, follow the rules, and outperform everyone else. From school to work to relationships, the message is clear. Play the game or you lose. But here's a truth that perhaps no one has told you with this clarity. Every game has a designer, and the designer always wins. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something that most people never grasp in their entire lives. He said, "A prince must learn how not to be good and to use this knowledge or not use it according to necessity." Now, most people read this and think Machiavelli was advocating cruelty, but they're missing the deeper insight. He was talking about the ultimate form of power, the power to operate outside the moral framework that controls everyone else. Do you know what happens when you refuse to play by rules you never agreed to? You stop being predictable. And predictability is the foundation of all manipulation. Every system of control, whether it's a corporate hierarchy, a social circle, or a romantic relationship, depends on you accepting certain premises. That effort equals reward. That loyalty earns respect. That playing by the rules eventually gets you what you want. But Machiavelli saw through this. He observed that the rules aren't designed for you to win. They're designed to keep you playing. Because as long as you're competing within the system, you're serving the system. You're giving your energy, your time, your creativity to a game where the real prizes were already distributed before you even sat down at the table. Think about it. How many people do you know who work themselves to exhaustion, following every rule, checking every box, being the good employee, the reliable friend, the understanding partner, and somehow they're still losing, still exhausted, still undervalued, still wondering when it's going to be their turn? Carl Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to fit into society's expectations. But Machiavelli would add this: your persona isn't just a mask. It's a prison uniform. It marks you as someone who has agreed to play by rules you don't even understand, and the moment you put it on, you've already lost. Being a good person, by society's definition, means being controllable. It means responding to guilt. It means following obligations you never consciously chose. It means staying in your lane, not disrupting the order, accepting your position in the hierarchy. And here's the cruelest point. The better you are at being good, the more trapped you become. Machiavelli watched this play out in Renaissance Italy. He saw virtuous princes lose their kingdoms. He saw moral leaders get destroyed by those willing to operate outside conventional morality. And he realized something uncomfortable. Goodness, as defined by social convention, is often just another word for weakness. But before you misunderstand, this isn't about becoming evil. It's about something far more radical. It's about recognizing that the entire framework of good versus evil within any system is just another control mechanism. It's a false choice designed to keep you playing. So I ask you now, looking into your eyes, what game are you playing that you never consciously chose to enter? What rules are controlling your life that you never agreed to follow? What competition are you exhausting yourself in where the prizes were predetermined before you arrived? Maybe it's time to step off the board entirely, because when you refuse to play, the whole game loses its power over you. Let's go deeper into what Machiavelli actually understood about power. When he wrote The Prince, he wasn't giving advice on how to be a better player. He was revealing how the game actually works, and once you see the mechanism, you can never unsee it. Every social system operates on what we might call voluntary imprisonment. You're not forced to compete for approval at work. You choose to. You're not forced to prove your worth in relationships. You volunteer. You're not forced to measure yourself against others. You do it automatically. And this is the genius of the system. It makes you your own jailer. Machiavelli observed that people who succeed within systems are usually the ones who've completely internalized the rules. They've made the game's values their own values. They genuinely believe that climbing the ladder matters, that status symbols represent real achievement, that winning competitions they didn't design mean something profound. But there's a darker psychological truth here, one that Jung would recognize immediately. When you internalize the game's rules, you're not becoming successful. You're becoming colonized. Your psychic energy, your life force, your creative power, all of it gets channeled into pursuits that serve the system, not your authentic self. Jung called this the process of identification with the persona. You become the role, the employee, the competitor, the player. And in becoming that role, you lose access to your deeper self, the part of you that knows this game is meaningless. Machiavelli would say, "Fine, let them play. Let them scramble for positions that were designed to keep them scrambling. While they're exhausting themselves trying to be the best player, you'll be redesigning the entire board." Here's what most people don't realize about competition. It's always downstream from rule setting. The person who defines what winning means has already won. The person who determines what metrics matter has already secured their advantage. And the person who can make you care about their game has already defeated you without lifting a finger. Think about every hierarchy you've ever been part of. Someone decided what qualifications matter. Someone determined what behaviors get rewarded. Someone designed the evaluation criteria. And chances are, it wasn't you. You just showed up and started playing by rules that were optimized for someone else's benefit. This is what Machiavelli meant when he discussed virtue. Not virtue in the moral sense, but the capacity to shape reality itself. True power isn't about being the strongest lion. It's about deciding what strength means in the first place. But here comes the uncomfortable part. Most people can't step outside the game because they've built their entire identity around their position within it. Their self-worth is measured in job titles, their value determined by social status, their existence validated by likes, promotions, and recognition from others. Jung would recognize this as the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. In this case, the shadow is the terrifying possibility that everything you've been competing for might be worthless. That all your achievements within the system might be elaborate distractions from the real question, what do you actually want when no one is keeping score? Machiavelli forces you to confront this. He asks, if you weren't trying to impress anyone, what would you do? If there were no external measures of success, what would success even mean to you? If you couldn't hide behind your resume, your relationship status, your social media following, who would you be? This is why his philosophy is so disturbing to most people. It's not because he's advocating immorality. It's because he's suggesting that your entire framework for understanding success might be an elaborate con game, and you're both the mark and the accomplice. The projection mechanism Jung described works perfectly here. Society projects onto you the image of what you should want, the career, the lifestyle, the status markers. And rather than questioning whether you actually want these things, you internalize the projection. You make other people's goals your goals. You make the system's metrics your metrics. And here's where it gets really dark. The more you achieve within this framework, the more invested you become in defending it. Because if you admit the game is rigged, you have to face the fact that everything you've accumulated might not represent real value at all. Successful people within systems often become the system's fiercest defenders, not despite their success, but because of it. They've spent so much energy climbing a ladder. Admitting the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall is psychologically devastating. Machiavelli saw this in the political leaders of his time. Princes who followed all the rules of proper leadership lost their kingdoms to those who recognized that the rules themselves were the trap. Moral leaders got outmaneuvered by those willing to operate from a different paradigm entirely. But, and this is crucial, Machiavelli wasn't advocating for random cruelty or destruction. He was advocating for conscious choice, for the power to use conventional morality when it serves you and discard it when it doesn't. For the sovereignty to decide for yourself what game is worth playing, if any. Jung called the journey toward this kind of consciousness individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are beneath all the social conditioning. And both Jung and Machiavelli understood that this process requires you to step outside the collective game, to face the void of having no external measure of your worth, and to forge your own values from that emptiness. So now, the real question emerges. Are you ready to stop playing? Are you prepared to face the psychological chaos that comes when you withdraw from competitions that gave your life structure? Can you handle the existential vertigo of having no ladder to climb, no game to win, no external validation to chase? Because once you step outside the game, you're in unmapped territory. And that's terrifying for most people. Which is exactly why they'll never do it, and why you'll have all the power if you do. Let's talk about what it actually looks like to refuse the game. Because this isn't a theoretical exercise. This is a complete restructuring of how you interact with reality. First, you have to identify what game you're actually playing. And here's the trick. You're probably playing several simultaneously without even knowing it. The status game at work, the desirability game in relationships, the success game among friends, the intelligence game in conversations, the virtue game on social media. Each of these games has implicit rules. In the workplace, maybe the rule is, whoever works longest hours shows the most dedication. In relationships, perhaps it's, whoever cares less has more power. Among friends, it might be, whoever has the most impressive life wins. These rules aren't posted anywhere. They're never explicitly stated, but everyone plays by them. Machiavelli's first lesson: recognize that these rules exist to control you. Someone benefits from you believing that long hours equal dedication. Someone profits from you thinking you need to prove your worth through consumption. Someone gains when you measure yourself against others. Your first act of rebellion is simple. Stop accepting these premises. When your workplace celebrates overwork, you don't have to compete for the hardest worker trophy. When your social circle judges success by external markers, you don't have to play that comparison game. When dating culture tells you to play hard to get or maximize options, you don't have to optimize for that metric. But, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, refusing to play feels like losing. At first, because you're conditioned to measure yourself by the game's standards. When you stop competing for promotions, part of you panics. Am I giving up? Am I failing? When you stop seeking social validation, your mind screams, am I becoming irrelevant? This is the withdrawal phase, and it's brutal. Jung understood that individuation requires a period of isolation, not physical necessarily, but psychological, a time when you stop measuring yourself by any external standard and sit with the terrifying question, without the game, who am I? Most people can't handle this void. They rush back to the game, to the comfort of knowing their place in the hierarchy, even if that place is low. Because a low position in a known game feels safer than the infinite possibility of no game at all. But Machiavelli would tell you, this void is where real power is born. Because while everyone else is still competing within the system, you're developing the capacity to create systems. While they're playing by rules, you're learning to write rules. While they're seeking positions, you're discovering that positions are arbitrary constructs. Here's a practical example. Imagine you're in a workplace where everyone competes for face time with the boss. They stay late, volunteer for everything, constantly prove their value. The game's implicit rule is visibility equals value. The conventional player tries to be more visible than everyone else, arriving earlier, leaving later, making sure the boss knows about every achievement. But they're still playing. They've accepted the premise that visibility equals value. The person who's learned from Machiavelli sees the game and asks, why am I accepting this premise? What if I define value differently? What if instead of competing for attention, I become so valuable that my absence is felt more than others' presence? So they focus on becoming genuinely irreplaceable, not through performative overwork, but through building unique capabilities, controlling critical information, or creating dependencies that make the system need them. They're not playing for the boss's attention. They're restructuring the relationship so they have leverage. This is the difference between playing the game better and refusing the game's premises entirely. It's Machiavellian in the truest sense, not cruel, but operating from a completely different framework. But let me be very clear about something. This path is lonely, because when you stop playing the games that connect you to others, those connections weaken. The co-workers who bonded over complaining about work find you strange when you don't engage. The friends who defined themselves by comparison wonder why you're not competing anymore. The romantic partners who thrived on drama don't know what to do with your refusal to play power games. Jung would say this is necessary shadow work. You have to face the uncomfortable truth that many of your connections were based on shared games, not genuine intimacy. That your social identity was built on positions in hierarchies, not authentic self-expression. That your relationships often serve to validate your persona rather than nurture your soul. And here's where people usually give up. Because losing your social connections, even shallow ones, triggers deep evolutionary panic. We're tribal creatures. Isolation once meant death. So when you step outside the collective games, your nervous system interprets it as life-threatening rejection. But Machiavelli understood that this fear is the final control mechanism. The system's ultimate protection is making you believe that stepping outside means stepping into oblivion, that refusing to play means becoming nothing. The truth is the opposite. When you stop playing games you never wanted to win, you finally have energy for what actually matters to you. When you stop measuring yourself by arbitrary standards, you can develop real capabilities. When you stop seeking positions in other people's hierarchies, you can build your own paradigm. This is what Machiavelli meant by necessity. The prince who knows when to be good and when to discard goodness is responding to reality, not to social programming. They're acting from sovereign choice, not conditioned reflex. So how do you actually do this? How do you develop this capacity? Start small. Find one game you're playing unconsciously and consciously choose to stop. Maybe it's the social media validation game. Post without checking likes. Maybe it's the overwork game. Leave on time regardless of optics. Maybe it's the people-pleasing game. Say no without elaborate justification. Watch what happens. Feel the discomfort. Notice who gets upset by your refusal to play. These reactions reveal how much your participation was serving others' games, not your growth. Then expand. Every time you catch yourself competing for something you don't actually want, stop. Every time you notice you're following a rule you never agreed to, question it. Every time you realize you're measuring yourself by someone else's metrics, create your own. This isn't about becoming a sociopath who doesn't care about anyone. It's about becoming sovereign, someone who chooses their games consciously rather than playing compulsively. Someone who can cooperate with others from genuine alignment rather than fear of exclusion. Someone who can be good or not good depending on what serves their authentic path, not what serves the system's demands. And yes, people will call you selfish, arrogant, cold, detached. But here's what Machiavelli knew. These accusations are last-ditch attempts to pull you back into the game. They're moral judgments designed to make you feel guilty for claiming your sovereignty. The truly powerful don't justify themselves to those still trapped in the game. They simply continue building from outside it, and eventually the game reshapes itself around their new paradigm. Because that's the secret Machiavelli never explicitly stated but demonstrated throughout his work. The person who refuses to play the current game eventually sets the terms for the next one. When you finally step off the board, when you genuinely refuse to play games you never chose, something remarkable happens. First comes the silence. That same uncomfortable silence we talked about earlier. The silence of not being ranked, measured, compared. The silence of having no leaderboard to check, no hierarchy to climb, no competition to win. And in that silence, you rediscover something you lost when you first learned to play. Your actual preferences, your real desires, your authentic curiosity, the things you'd pursue even if no one was watching, no one was scoring, no one was handing out prizes. Machiavelli, despite his reputation for cynicism, understood something deeply humanistic. When you strip away all the games, what remains is your genuine nature. And that nature, when freed from the need to prove itself, becomes extraordinarily powerful. Because here's the paradox. The person who needs nothing from the game becomes irresistible to those still playing. They carry an energy of completeness that others can sense but can't quite name. They're not chasing validation, so they can't be controlled through approval or rejection. They're not competing for position, so they can't be manipulated through status games. Jung called this wholeness, the integration of all aspects of self into a coherent or authentic identity. Machiavelli would call it true virtue, the power that comes from self-sovereignty rather than from external position. You'll lose people in this transformation. Absolutely. Anyone who valued you primarily for your position in their game will drift away. But you'll also attract something different. People who resonate with your authenticity rather than your utility. Connections based on genuine alignment rather than strategic networking. The career opportunities that come to you will be different too. Instead of climbing predetermined ladders, you'll find yourself creating new paradigms. Instead of competing in established games, you'll discover you're inventing new ones. On your terms, by your rules, serving your vision. This is the ultimate Machiavellian move. Not playing better than everyone else, but becoming the person who decides what game gets played next. Not seeking the throne in someone else's kingdom, but building a kingdom where you define what royalty means. And the beautiful irony, once you stop caring about winning the game, you've already won. Because the real prize was never the position, the trophy, the recognition. It was always sovereignty, the power to choose your own path, define your own success, live by your own values. So I ask you one final time, are you ready to stop playing? Are you prepared to face the void between games and discover who you are in that space? Can you handle being misunderstood, criticized, or dismissed by those still measuring themselves by rules you've transcended? If this resonates with you, if it sparked something, write in the comments, "I refuse to play." Let's see how many people here are ready to step off the board and redesign the game entirely. Today, we learned from Niccolò Machiavelli that true power comes not from playing the game better, but from refusing to play by rules we never chose. And from Carl Jung, we discovered that individuation, becoming wholly ourselves, requires stepping outside the collective games that define most people's lives. If these insights sparked a moment of clarity for you, hit the like button to share this wisdom with others who might be trapped in games they never wanted to play. Subscribe to join our community, where we explore profound psychological and philosophical ideas that transform how we see ourselves and the world. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember, the strongest position is the one you create for yourself, not the one you compete for in someone else's hierarchy. Until we meet again, carry this insight forward. You don't have to play games that don't serve your soul. And don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's important, much more than you imagine. See you there. May you find our talks not only educational, but also inspirational, and hopefully, ultimately, transformational. See you next time.